Welcome to Intelligent Human Leadership, leading yourself and your team. Do you ever find yourself grappling with a lack of confidence in your team? Or battling the relentless waves of concern and fear? Are the pressures to meet client expectations and the burden of missed opportunities weighing you down? On this podcast, you'll discover the strategies and insights that will reignite your team's morale and help you find the harmony and knowledge you seek to propel your business forward. Here, we explore innovative ways to reignite your creative spirit and achieve greatness, empowering you to lead with intelligence, compassion, and resilience. If you're ready to dive deep into your core of leadership challenges and be guided toward success, here's your host, founder of Steward Your Business, David Carr.
Hey everybody, here we are back on the Intelligent Human Leadership podcast. We are going to jump into a topic that I'm facing as I'm recording this, and I thought it would be a really applicable topic in how do you set up your team for success when you're taking time off, or when you need to be remote, or you need to be in a way that they're not going to be able to reach you maybe for a day or two or a week. And I find that this is a great stress test, if you will, to see where are there gaps in your organization, where are there gaps in your leadership, your delegation. And so on this podcast today, I'm going to jump into it. How can we set up our team for success when we are taking personal time off, or we need to be focused on something else outside of the business, and we need to make ourselves unavailable for a time? And I'm not just talking for a little bit of a day, but I'm talking, a good number of days, hopefully even a week or longer, where you can step away, you can deal with the challenges of life. If you're raising your kids, you've got taking care of aging parents, maybe unfortunately a death in the family, or a friend, and you need that time. You need that time to be present for those other people in your life. And how do you set your team up for success? So on the Intelligent Human Leadership podcast, we're all about empowering you to be that intelligent human leader, to lead yourself well, to lead your team. And so I'm going to break it down for you as we get into the podcast today to look at those challenges externally of you, internally, and some philosophical challenges that I'm going to have you consider that you may not have. Now, some of the things I'm going to bring up on the podcast, you may be doing some of these things, but maybe you can look at how you're doing them and find ways that you can improve in engaging with your team. When we're looking at taking time off, and I've been doing this, and I've been preparing, quite honestly, for about a month or so. I've known I've been having a big trip where I will be meeting with other giant guides here coming up this coming week that I'm certified with. We have an annual gathering, what we call, and it's a way of training and personal development. But I'm going to be unplugged. I'm going to be away from some clients and some other projects that I've been working on. So I've had to prepare clients and others in being aware and understanding how to anticipate potential needs that come up. And I do this with my clients. And so I thought, let me share with you things that I've learned over my 20 plus years in environmental consulting and working in this way. And so one of the ways we can look at that is identifying key external challenges. So when I look at an external challenge, it's something outside of me, like how am I going to delegate responsibility? Making sure roles and responsibilities are clear when you're gone. Now, this means you have certain things that you do normally that other people do not. It's good to have redundancy and people trained up to know, hey, if I'm not here, this is what's going to happen. And so, for example, if there's a new proposal that comes in and I need to fully execute that proposal, make that contract up, get that up and running, who can authorize that? Who can sign for that, right? Because if you're the only person, that's a problem, right? You're going to be delaying possibly the kickoff of a project. Delegation's a big one. We'll get more into that here in the podcast. But there's also timelines. What's the importance of these timelines, the deadlines. How are we aligning the team and the resources and the expectations there? You can't set it and forget it. Unfortunately, I'd love to do that, but we need to know what are those timelines. And if you're not explicit, some people don't know. They are unaware of some of the ramifications if they don't respond in a timely manner. Let's just say there's a certain deadline that needs to be met. You want to make sure the team's successful and they know, oh, this is when this needs to be responded to. This is what I'm anticipating a response back on, right? What are those key communication timelines? Are your tools and systems in place, your project management software, your communication platforms, whatever that might be, if it's Teams, Asana, Slack, whatever the one you like using, right? Is everybody clear on where do they need to be looking for these things? What's the mode that they need to be using for communication, right? We have so many ways of communicating: text, email, instant message. What's the way that you need to see people communicating and using the right resources, right? Especially if there's somebody that's not normally doing that with you, that they're saying, well, I'm going to step in, you're going to be out. What's this thing I need to be looking for? What's this email or what's this information? What should I be monitoring, right? And one of the big ones is your accountability. What is the chain of command or the temporary leadership structure for decision making? This is a big one, and I find oftentimes this is where, like I said, I mentioned earlier about who's authorized to sign a contract. Think through this, because this is where there's usually gaps I've found, because somebody can't make a decision, and if you can't make a decision, that could cripple the company depending on what it is and how long you have to be gone for. And so you want to try to think about like who would step in, who would be responsible for this if I was out. It could be something as simple as getting timesheets approved. That was one thing I used to have to deal with. Like, who's going to review these timesheets and expenses if you're out? We need to get those through the system. We need to make sure that they're authorized and approved, and that they're not held up. So you want to start thinking through these things, and you don't want to do it the day that you're leaving or whatever. There's emergencies that come up, no doubt. But if we can avoid that emergency and be more prepared and thinking through some of these things, that will help go a long way to reducing stress, burnout, frustration on your team, people not knowing where that tool is or where that file is, because they didn't, you didn't take the time to be proactive. You don't want your team in reactive mode. You want them to be proactive and prepared for the things that are going to come up, or possibly the things that you don't even know that are going to come up. That's what this is a good stress test. So that way you can set up your team for success while you're taking time off, while you're away from the business. So those are some external challenges that we can consider. I want you also to look at some things, some solutions here. So, I identify problems, but I also want to help you here when you're listening to this podcast, is that you can take actionable items away. You can take things and implement it. I'm all about not just hitting you with knowledge, but giving you wisdom, practical application, and how to address these challenges. So, if you're not already doing some kind of pre-meetings before you're going to leave, that's a great thing. You should be preparing your team. It doesn't have to be long meetings, but it should be intentional about what is the area that you need to have covered. One could be, for example, payroll. If you're involved with payroll, making sure everything is authorized, who's going to do that? How is it going to get checked? What's the process? That's one that I see oftentimes in small businesses that can get hung up. But if you do pre-meetings and you're like, okay, here's the steps, we understand the operations here, the systems that we're going to go through, that will help you make sure that things run smoothly. Today in our modern world, we have so many great automations. I was using an email out of office responder, so I'm already planning the time that I'm going to be out, the date, and the return time. What is the message I'm crafting? Who am I responding to? Who am I pointing to? This could be a messenger too. If I use Teams for example, and Teams not only allows you to, you could put a message showing a status. I'm out of office, or here's if they message you in addition to an email. So think about ways you can leverage technology to help you and make sure that it's getting escalated in the right direction in case you're out. People know who to go to or what the next step is. Call me if you don't get a response on an email, for example. And make sure that you're providing your team a roadmap of priorities. When you're in an emergent situation, there is triage. So it's like, okay, well, this is the most important thing that we need to make sure we hit on. This would be second, this would be third, and so forth. What is that for you and your team while you're gone? You maybe have a really important client or big proposal or project that has some key deadlines, and say, this is the one that if anything has to fall, not this one. And so if you don't do that, if everything is left kind of co-equal, then you're allowing your team to decide, and they may choose poorly, not because they don't care, it's just because they don't know any different. You haven't given them clear direction and a priority roadmap of what should they be considering when all these inputs are coming in. So those are some external challenges that you're going to likely face. And I want to talk a little bit about the internal challenges. These are more about the feelings, the emotions that are going on with you. Oftentimes there's a trust issue. Can we trust? Can we trust our team? Can we let go? Do we have struggles of perfection, or we do have struggles of micromanagement, of potentially our level of risk that we're willing to take on? And so this is going to be hard for you potentially to step away because you're feeling like I can't let go. There might be anxiety or concerns about what might fall apart in your absence. And these can be, depending on what's going on in the business, it could be very paralyzing because you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know. I don't think I can leave it to this person or whatnot. So I want you to be real about where you're at in this process. And honestly, the more you can embrace it, understand it, meaning not saying that I want you to live in a place of fear or anxiety, but I want you to at least acknowledge what it is. I want to help you, encourage you in that, but we are going to work on ways that we can overcome that. But I want you to, number one, identify what's your feelings that come up when it says, hey, I'm not going to be able to respond for a week and I've got to step away from the company. What do you have, like a pressure of perfectionism, perhaps needing to make sure everything works just right? And if it doesn't, I'm going to feel really bad about myself or feel really bad about how the company's showing up. So I want you to look and identify what is that for yourself. In the 5 voices framework, I really like that tool. We break down some triggers there that you might come up for you based on your voice order type. So if you've done that 5 voices, I would say go back to that and look at it. And if you haven't, you can do the free assessment. Just message me and I'll send you a free link and you can get your first voice, find out more about that process. But what are your triggers? What's causing you to not sleep well at night? And here's where, as a consultant, I can come help you develop your team so they're more equipped, ready and prepared to face those challenges when you're away. So that you can let go, that you can trust, that you can have peace about them making sure that things are going to get covered. And so some ways that we can do that, solutions for overcoming that internal challenge is really start by building trust. Share practical strategies, trusting your team, focusing on the outcome rather than micromanagement. Here's the ideal outcome that we want to have. This is what we're shooting for, guys. And empower them and let them know that you're trusting them and that you need them. This is like, I can't do it all. I need your help. I need your expertise to come in here and let's win together. There's a mind shift often that we have to come. And recognize that there's mistakes are going to happen. It's just inevitable, right? We want to minimize them, of course, but we can learn from them too. And that's why I said earlier in the podcast that you have this gap, if you will, of a stress test. And when you do that in a good way, you want to see where the challenges are so you can fix it going forward. Ideally, we find small ones here that aren't catastrophic. So that way it prevents something to being catastrophic. It's like, oh yeah, I wasn't clear on my communication schedule or when things needed to be out and a deliverable or response, right? And it's not the end of the world, but we can recover from this. Look at delegation as empowerment. Your effective delegation can empower your team members. It can help them grow and take ownership. I've seen this in the companies that I work with, where you're not having to keep pushing it so much. They're like, oh, I'll take this on. Oh, I see why you're allowing me to do this. I want to do more of this. You'll be surprised, honestly, as you get to do this and people really embrace it. Those in your team members that really see that it really is a form of empowerment, that will help you overcome this internal challenge of letting go, perfectionism, trusting your team. But this can be a big challenge, and this is where I can work with you as a business owner too, to identify your teams. One of the things I love about organizational health and people is really bringing people together to accomplish great things. That's my personal why. And I've thankfully been gifted this way of being able to see the pieces of the puzzle about the unique skills and abilities that team members are. And I was just talking about that with a client today about how she's going to have to make some moves in her company and how we can move some team members around. How can we get things covered so that she can take the time off that she needs and has the support from her team. And so that's an area, sometimes it's hard to understand all of that. And that's one of the areas I'm really gifted at and very thankful that I can help business owners and leaders in moving, kind of thinking like the chessboard or getting people in the right place to be successful, to win. And the other component I wanted to highlight on the podcast today is what are those kind of philosophical challenges that you might be facing? It's related to the internal, but do you really believe that you must always be present for the team to succeed? Is that your philosophy? Because if it is, I'm going to challenge you on it. If you feel like you have to be present always for your team, then I think there's I think I want to challenge you in that, because I think you need to be able to step away. This is my personal philosophy. That if you have to be there all the time, holding your team, answering their questions, you haven't been able to empower them. And I think there's a level of trust, or I said maybe mistrust there, and not building and allowing them to grow and to become more engaged in having ownership and being proactive. I want think about that. Are you that person? And maybe you're thinking more highly of yourself. I've talked about this in the past episode about the ego getting in the way. Some leaders really tie their identity to being constantly available, and they may fear that you're not as valuable if they're not always on. And if that's the case, look about where's your self-worth coming from? Is it because you're there? Is that your self-worth in the team? Because if somebody's knocking on your door, but you don't want to be what do I want to say? You want to be indispensable, but not irreplaceable. If that makes sense, think about that. You want to be indispensable, meaning you're so helpful, but you want to be replaceable in a good way. If you're a small business owner, let's just say, and you want to sell your company one day and you're irreplaceable, your company is really not that valuable because it's only as good as you are there. If you're building a team, systems, and processes, that is what's the most valuable to somebody that would buy or acquire a business. But if it's all built on you and your presence there, your name, it's really only as valuable as you're a part of that company, and it's not really sustainable, and it's really hard to scale that. And so you want to look about the company and the entity that I'm a part of is bigger than just me. And I've helped business owners and have to walk this walk, if you will, where they've started a company, it's grown to a certain stage, and then they're like, oh man, this company is bigger than me. It was what it was me at one point, but this is a persona. It's growing, it's changing. And it's a challenging thing, but it's a beautiful thing if you really lean into it, because you're allowing an organization to serve and grow and bring in new people. And that to me is very exciting. You can redefine your leadership success, realizing that you're not that person that always has to be there. You can lead by example, showing your team that you can take off, you can have that work-life balance, which is so important, particularly for the different generations look at this and they want to know that, hey, I can step away from the business. I don't always have to be on. And you can create that healthier organizational culture in leading it by yourself. You have a long-term impact when you look at this and your philosophy and how you're leading your team, empowering them to function independently and strengthens that whole organization. So on the podcast here today, I've given you some things to think about and some practical tools, from identifying your external challenges, your internal challenges, and the philosophical challenges you may have. And I want you to do an inventory on yourself. Look at that. Maybe you're doing well on the external, because oftentimes those are a little bit easier, doing those meetings and setting up those maybe systems or processes. But you may still be holding on to certain areas and feeling like, I just can't completely let go. And I would challenge you on that and see, like, how could I have some redundancy? How can I have some other folks come in and step in and allow them to get that experience of what you're doing? Because ultimately you're going to want to be, like I said, replaceable, but not indispensable. As we wrap up the podcast today, and I always appreciate you guys listening in, and I always welcome your feedback and comments here, I want you to remember, before you leave, just look at these key things of communication and setting clear expectations for your team. Make sure you have a delegation strategy, who's in charge of what. And inevitably, there may be a crisis or something unexpected, and make sure you have a protocol for handling those emergencies in your absence. Trust the process. Give your team the authority and autonomy and ensure they understand how to do that and reach you if there's an emergency. There that may be, but there's got to be escalation. There's got to be a chain of command, and ways that you can step away in a healthy way, having that work-life balance, using this understanding, this framework of addressing those external challenges, setting the expectations, getting the tools in place, overcoming maybe those internal challenges that you face, trusting your team, letting go, and reflecting about your leadership role, your own philosophy about how you're going to lead yourself and your teams. Remember, taking time off is important. Being able to step away is part of the journey of it's healthy. It's stress testing your company. It's making sure that you can focus on things that are important of life. We want to look at the holistic aspect. You've heard me talk about your core four. It's not just your business, it's your balance, that meaning your relationships, it's your being, your spiritual walk, your mental well-being, and your body, your physical self. How are you taking care of that? Make sure that you take that time off. Be intentional. Be that proactive leader, that intelligent human leader. I'm so glad you guys are here. Appreciate your comments, reviews, and sharing this if it resonated with you. And until next time, continue to strive to be that intelligent human leader, and take a time off and enjoy this season of life, wherever you may be. Thanks everybody for listening.